Hi, my name is Cindy and welcome to Snacks and Stacks. I love to talk about books, movies, and TV shows, so it has been a bit since I've come on here and uploaded a video, so thank you for watching, and if you're new, welcome. Yeah, so this video is going to be about my favorite read so far this year, and that is going to be the Winternight Trilogy. Ta-da! I started by rereading The Bear and the Nightingale, which I read maybe 2 years ago, and then so I knew I had to reread it just to get back into this world. And I remember that there was like specific things about it, and so I actually listened to the audiobook, and then I listened and read The Girl in the Tower, and I mostly read, just with my eyeballs, The Winter of the Witch. And my thoughts are a little scattered right now because I haven't like planned anything out, but this reading experience was so good that I'm actually doing a little experiment to try to find my next series to read. But I'm going to put a side note on that and just talk about this series. So The Bear and the Nightingale, we start off in medieval times in like the deep woods of the Russian territory. And I say territory because at this time Russia is actually under the rule of, I think, like Mongols. There's someone else who is in charge of like the Russian properties, and even though there are grand princes of Russia, it's called Rus, so R-U-S. And at this point, we also see the rise of Christianity, and in this book that is quite important, we also see the appearance of a lot of Russian folklore and those creatures. And so this is a historical fantasy in where these folklore creatures are actually thriving and alive in this time, and we have one of our main characters, Vasya, who can see them. In the very beginning of this book, we meet her mother, and she's kind of like about to be pregnant with Vasya, and she makes her husband promise to take care of this daughter. We learn that she has had several children and she's quite frail, and so she also has a feeling that Vasya is going to be very important. And so we kind of go on this journey with Vasya in these 3 books, and what she does is she saves Russia because she has this special ability to speak to, interact with this kind of folklore characters and this kind of like parallel world. It is absolutely amazing the way Katherine Arden writes this world. You feel very cold, and it's such a perfect winter read. I think we're supposed to have a snowstorm next week, so like pick this up. I know we're probably in the mood for spring already, but I had such a great time. So let me see, I think I did write notes for this, so let's see if I missed anything. I would say that this book is for those who enjoy a little bit of like historical fiction, because I had a good time looking up medieval Russia, and there are characters in this book that reference real life characters in history, and I don't want to spoil anything in this section, so I don't want to say who that is, but it's a good recommendation for people who enjoy like tales of family, because we really do follow Vasya, but I feel like her family as a whole is a character, and there's a lot of people in her family, like her brothers and sisters, that become, you know, perspectives at some point, and also characters that you really fall for and you really like love them as a family unit. And so I think it is perfect for people who like that in a story. The prose in this is really nice. Like, it's like a super nice blend of descriptive but not so flowery that you lose what's happening or the plot. And I think it's also has really great lines in there, but it doesn't feel out of place. And I think that the vibes for these books are fairy tale, folklore, fable-like, where it's a little bit like the characters. There's creatures in here that I would not expect. I am very new to Russian folklore though, so it might be creatures that you may expect if you're used to this type of story, but I think it's a great introduction for people who, like me, don't know much about Russian folklore, because there is a glossary in the back. They do a good job of explaining like who these creatures are as you meet them, and I think it's also a great book for those who just like a relatively fast-paced plot. Like, you know how in storygraph it's like, is this book plot-driven or character-driven? It's really a bit of both, and it's like just enough that even though in the first book we go through like jumps in time, we are falling in love with Vasya, and then in these we're really like the time gaps, there's like barely any in these. And I would say that this is for, you know how like there's like people who love horses? This is for people who love horses. I think it's, the horses do go through some stuff, so like be prepared, but the girl and horse bond in these books are amazing. And I've never been like a horse person, but I love animals, so I thought that was great. And yeah, I think that's all I can really say without spoiling too much of the story, but there are parts of the story that I would love to talk about in a more spoilery kind of chat. So if you haven't read this, and hopefully you want to, go for it, come back and hear my thoughts about the spoilers. I had to put this book down because of something that happened in the beginning, and I'm afraid that people are still watching and they're not gonna like this spoiler, but one of my favorite characters dies on page in front of us, and it was devastating. I'm sad that it took the whole book for this character to be brought back to life, but I guess it gives Vasya like a happier ending. I thought that these books were so good. They were like nearly perfect. Their stuff, I think the romance in this book isn't top notch, because I just felt like Vasya was so strong of a character that maybe she didn't really need that romance, and sometimes the romance felt a little bit like, oh, Vasya need help, like I don't know how she's gonna get out of this, so obviously the Winter King will come. And so I didn't love that, and I didn't love how she broke the curse for the Winter King. It felt a little like, really? And then there was a scene where her sister was like, so who is it? Like, I can tell just by looking at you. And like, I don't know. If I was a young girl, like a teenage girl reading this, I would probably be like feeling a certain way about it. But as a 34-year-old reading this, I felt like that's not how it works. And I just felt like it felt forced, I think. The romance felt a little forced, but I think everything else in this book made up for it. So I can't even explain. And I love the brother-sister relationships and sister-sister relationships in all of these books. I'm sad that, okay, for those of you who have read this, are you guys sad that we meet so much of her siblings and then we miss out on some of them in these next books? Because like in the first book, we're with Alyosha, her like younger brother, And he's amazing. I love him in this book. And then he's not in the next two at all because she's in Moscow in the next two. And I love Sasha and her sister. I can't think of her name. It's been weeks, so I'm sorry. And I love Sasha, but okay, Sasha is based on a real historical figure. And if you look up that historical figure, you know that Sasha dies. And so like, I felt a way. I felt a certain way when that happened because I get attached. I get attached and I'm not okay. So when they did that, which is cool how it matches history, I was bummed and I was like, where's my other brother to help me with this? I needed more of the family altogether, but also very much understood why, you know, they're just separate. I think I should have made this video closer to when I finished it because I feel like I'm coming off negatively because I am just still stewing on the things that I wish happened in this book. I wished that the ending was just a smidge longer. Like it's a bit open-ended. She like saves the day and then she goes off and I'm like, I need an epilogue. I've just followed these guys since birth. I have followed Vasya since birth. I need an epilogue. I need to know what happens now because she's amazing and all this stuff, and she's found like her great-great-grandmother, I think, and she's found like a place, and her niece has the same powers she does. So what happens now? What happens now? I need to know. So yes, I'm sorry. I started out with everything that I was like, about. So the things I loved about this book, I loved that she had to work with the bear at the end. So in the very beginning, you know, when I never would have thought that the bear actually needs to be there, right? Because in a lot of fantasy, we have the good guy, we have the bad guy, and I kind of love that about this genre. I love just knowing that this is a bad guy and this is a good guy and this is where we go. Like we gotta beat him up. We gotta win. But I think as I get older, I'm not as black and white, and I realize there are gray areas. And so this whole journey that we go on, where there's always a guy in there that we are fighting, but like ultimately at the end of the book, the only villain was really that magician guy, and he was just wanting too much power. And at the end of the day, I loved how the folklore creatures, all the bear, the Winter King, all of those people, they are gray, and it's great that they stay that way. There's a character in here, her name is Midnight, and she basically betrays Vasya at one point and like puts her somewhere where she's in danger instead of putting her where she wanted. And I think that choice for a second was kind of annoying. I was like, oh no, she's in danger again. But it makes sense for these characters because they have lived forever, and people, I've found that the longer you live, the more gray your world becomes. And so like we have these spirits that have been around for a long time, and we have humans who are now denouncing the spirits. They're not, you know, worshiping them or giving them food or giving them sacrifices in a sense. They are no longer worshiping them. And so I can see how these spirit creatures are a bit bitter about that. And I love that they make decisions based on that. And it's not just easy decisions to make. And like I said, I love how at the very end, Vasya had to embrace that other side, you know, the side of the bear kind of entices fear and like makes people act in a way that's because they are fearing something else. And I love how that went full circle, and she used that to help Russia and to help her team basically. And it kind of gives this message that like, you know, yeah, the good guys won, but like, hey, we still had to use some tactics that are not, you know, all good and gravy. And so I think that was a wonderful way to say it. The priest in this, I think his name is Constantine. He is in this book throughout, and like, I hate him, but I also am so interested by him as a character. He is so interesting. He's awful to Vasya, so like, of course I kind of hate him, but it's also like, Vasya's like, I should have just let you die. But also, like, because she didn't, because she saved him, he's out here. He causes a lot of grief for her. And I sometimes sit there and I'm like, should have just let that one spirit get her. Like, I don't know. Yeah, and Vasya's growth in this book is also another thing I love. I love the scenes that, like, might be on the nose. It's a bit on the nose. It's very parallel, but there's a scene where her sister's giving birth and the Winter King comes, and basically the Winter King was saying, like, it's one or the other, and the mother or the child. The Winter King is also the person that takes the person to the death, right? So in this choice, Vasya makes the choice for her sister. She wants her sister to be saved. And so the Winter King takes the baby. But when the sister wakes up, she's like, that wasn't my choice, though. That would not have been my choice. And so, like, this scene, first of all, parallels in the very beginning, which is when Vasya's mother gives birth, and she dies giving birth to Vasya. So, like, just kind of like the importance of that scene repeated here with her sister. And then the scene is also sort of repeated at the very end when her brother is dying, and, you know, she has say, like, she's talking to the Winter King, and I'm not sure, like, how it would have been, but we learn in the middle of the book that the bear and the Winter King, like, they can work out some way to make people relive, and we don't really know. And in the book, they're zombies, so, like, we don't know exactly how that works. But, you know, she's like kind of like talking to Sasha, like, you know, we should. I want you to live. And he basically says that it's his choice, and he wants to go out this way, and she accepts it, which is like the growth that she kind of has in these books. So yeah, I love this series. I hope more people read it, and I have no idea if this video made any sense, so I'm so sorry. But I really, really, really wanted to make a video talking about these books and just sharing how much I love them, how much I think you should read them. And I also just like had like word vomit to talk about the scenes and the things that were stressing me out and the things that I wish were better, and the coolest things about just like looking it up in history and reading stuff about that. So anyways, that's my crazy video. I'm not sure if any of it made any sense. I hope it did. But so far, this is my favorite read of the year. Happy binging, happy reading, happy snacking, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!